Oh.
Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
You gotta be confident about your Achilles when you
Chase
show up.
Thornton,
Yeah, I mean, I got it.
and Adam LaRue. Don't hope to be great and dominate.
All right. Welcome back into another edition of Operation Domination. Don't hope to win, be great and dominate. As always, I'm your host, Dan Mader, with the full crew in the building today. We got Chase Thornton and Adam LaRue. Today, we got an exciting episode for you guys. We're moving past all the NFL draft stuff, and we're starting to think about 2026 and beyond, which brought me to the idea that it was time to talk about guys who are the biggest risers and fallers for 2026 and beyond. And this could be some guys we're talking about for this upcoming season or for the future reference, so we get a little bit of everything in here. Here was the homework, just so everybody's aware. Each host, 2 risers and 2 fallers. We'll talk about them. You'll see if you agree, disagree as we move toward, of course, we're in best ball season drafts really already. But as we get ready for the season, what we're looking at and what's truly changed over the offseason, now that free agency and the draft are both over and rosters, for the most part, are going to be pretty much locked in to what they are right now. Make sure you download Operation Domination on your favorite podcast app and check out our video content on the Fantasy Football Advice Network channel at FF Advice Net. All right, gentlemen, are you excited to talk about some risers and fallers? May is a pivotal month because it starts to feel like we're actually getting closer to football season. Like we're really starting to move past all the speculation and what could be 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. And we're starting to get a little bit more focused in the short term. It means football is getting a little bit closer to us. We got rookie mini camps coming up this week. I get very, very excited with this time of year. But let's get right into it. And we'll start off with Chase, because I want to know, Chase, let's start with your number 1 riser that you came with on this show.
All right. Well, my number 1 riser is DeVonta Smith, wide receiver, the Philadelphia Eagles. That is, of course, contingent on the A.J. Brown to the New England Patriots trade actually occurring. We kind of all assume it will. I think that's the prevailing, consensus idea among not just fantasy pundits, but like throughout the league as well. So provided that Mike Vrabel doesn't start an affair with another reporter or leave to become a financial advisor or run for Congress or whatever the flip else he's got, possibly going on in his personal life.
Talk about layers to that story, man. Like today there was something about like him and Diana Rossini rented a private boat while she was pregnant or something like it's gotten crazy with that story. Like
there's fewer photographers out on the water, so.
Well, almost to the point where I'm almost a little bit concerned if Mike Vrabel's going to be the head coach. But I mean, conversation for another day here and over there. I'll let you get back to it.
I mean, it sounds like a joke, but yeah, understanding, like I said, that we're assuming the A.J. Brown trade actually does happen here in another month or so, which I think we all agree that it will or should at least. If he leaves, we're looking at a lot of targets opening up in that offense. Okay. We're talking about the fact that in the 4 years that he's been in Philadelphia, A.J. Brown has averaged about 8.5 targets per game. Okay. And this is one of the offenses in the league that doesn't have a ton of passes. They don't attempt a ton of passes, compared to the rest of the league. Now, all of a sudden, literally a quarter of those targets are going to be wide open. Okay. For anybody to take. And it's also a team that has concentrated among their wide receivers. Their targets that they distribute to the wide receivers have been very, very, very concentrated at their top 2 of A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith. Now, over the past 4 years, DeVonta Smith has averaged about 7, just a little over 7 targets per game for the Eagles. But if you've got all of a sudden 8 or 9 targets per game that are opened up, we want to look at where do we think those targets are going to go? Who is going to pick up those targets? Well, they went out and they drafted Mekhi Lemon. Mekhi Lemon the way I see it is not a 1-for-1 plug-in in any way, shape, or form for what A.J. Brown does and for what he brings to the table. I like Mekhi Lemon a lot. I ranked him very highly, as did most people. But I don't think he's a 1-for-1 plug-in analog for what A.J. Brown brings that offense. Now, they brought in Dontavian Wicks from the Green Bay Packers. Now, as a guy who's watched Dontavian Wicks his entire career, Dontavian Wicks himself is not a 1-for-1 plug-in. Even if he plays just, straight X or whatever, and they put him on the outside, he's not a 1-for-1 plug-in for A.J. Brown. He's not going to give you the same kind of things that A.J. Brown can give you on a down-by-down basis. He's just too inconsistent for that. I don't think it's going to happen. And then you look at the rest of the receivers on their roster, and we're talking about guys like Hollywood Brown. We're talking about Elijah Moore. We're talking about less, appealing options like Quez Watkins and Johnny Wilson and nobody else we even care about. Well, the Elijah Moore, Hollywood Brown, DeVonta Smith, those are kind of redundant skill sets. I don't necessarily think that DeVonta Smith has anything to worry about from any of those other guys. It's mostly Mekhi Lemon that we're thinking about, but I think that Mekhi Lemon, again, doesn't take all of the A.J. Brown attention. So even if DeVonta Smith takes only 2 or 3 of those 8 or 9 targets per game that are now open, that shoots him way up into what I see as wide receiver 1 territory. He's been able, I haven't really been a DeVonta Smith guy like throughout his career, mostly because I don't think that the number 2 wide receiver on a run first offense is a winning fantasy formula, year in and year out. Now, to DeVonta Smith's credit, he has been able to parlay, what he does get into roughly mid to low end wide receiver 2-ish value, which shows me that the talent is there. There's no reason not to believe in DeVonta Smith's talent. It's just this offense and how he's been used. But if he gets 2 or 3 more targets a game, which I think he will, especially this year, as they try to integrate these new guys, Hollywood Brown, Mekhi Lemon, into that offense, that really bodes well for him. He has averaged about 1.6 points per target, fantasy points per target in his career. And if you do the math, you add all that up, you give him 2 more targets per game, that takes him from what last year was wide receiver 21 on a half game points per game basis up into like wide receiver 9, 10, 11 type territory. He's a top 12, a number 1 wide receiver fantasy wise all of a sudden. I don't see them bringing anybody else in. I don't see anybody else really worth bringing in at this point. So provided that the A.J. Brown trade happens, I'm actually going to be much more in on DeVonta Smith this season than I ever have in his career and in my time, watching him as a fantasy analyst as well. Curious to hear what you guys have to say on it, though.
Well, so he's in an interesting situation, first and foremost, because we have a situation where they're bringing in Sean Mannion to change this offense. And between what Sean Mannion's background is, and again, as a play caller, as how he executes it, still going to be a complete wild card. We got no data to back that up. But we can go by the fact that he comes from, the Rams and Sean McVay, and the fact that they drafted a Mekhi Lemon, knowing they already had a DeVonta Smith. This is shaping up very much to be a pro West Coast style of football. I don't think anybody would dispute that. So now you have DeVonta Smith on the other side. So yes, if A.J. Brown leaves, DeVonta is the one incumbent who already has the chemistry with Jalen Hurts. And by the way, I think DeVonta Smith's skill set would fit the new offense that they're trying to run very well too. The problem then comes into, okay, I don't think Jalen Hurts fits the system very well. So how consistent is he necessarily going to be? And DeVonta Smith to this point, and he's going to be at 28 going into the season, or turning 28 during the season. He hasn't really blown up at any point. Now, of course, he's at A.J. Brown on the other side of it. That does play a role in this whole thing, but he's never had double-digit touchdowns. I think he was on pace for it in 2024. I think he had 8 touchdowns, but he only played 13 games that year. So maybe he would have broken it that season, but it didn't wind up working out very well. But for the most part, not a prolific touchdown scorer, really hasn't gone over 1,200 yards receiving at any point. And he's just a different type of wide receiver where he's going to be dependent on Jalen Hurts hitting him with anticipation and on time for this offense to truly work. So I think there's a lot of things where I question how consistent, how efficient that type of offense is going to be with the Philadelphia Eagles with Jalen Hurts as the quarterback. But he had 113 targets last year. To your point, without A.J. Brown, is it really so hard to see that even on what was a run-first team, maybe moving towards more balanced, he gets 130 targets? If he gets 130 targets, like right now he's ranked at wide receiver 16. Well, it's real easy to lay out a scenario where volume-wise, he's going to be in that top 12. So I am kind of with you on that. I don't know if Adam wanted to chime in.
No, I'm definitely with you, and I don't really have too much to add. I think you guys, got it done. There's a lot to like about DeVonta Smith's offseason, and the AJ Brown trade, obviously. Hanging in the balance is a big part of it, but a lot of positives.
So, Adam, take us away for your riser then. Let's get into that.
Yeah, I mean, here's my Homer conversation of the day. But I think we've got a pretty easy slam dunk kind of conversation to have here. Alec Pierce was in the top 20 of yards per route run last season at 2.1. That's like tier 2, tier 3, like not quite the elite guys who were in this like insane level, but like doing pretty dang well for himself with the opportunities that he was able to get. And I think that getting Michael Pittman who out of the team, who we'll talk about a little bit later, hint, but getting him off of the team and signing this big deal, and for better or for worse, bringing back Daniel Jones, like I think these are all things that are valuable for Alec Pierce, at least individually, where like he was super efficient with the targets he got, and I find it very difficult to imagine that with what he is being paid, with the resources that he's like that has been put around him, and then with candidly not much investment in the receiver group by the team kind of throughout, like even if it was like a 3rd round pick at receiver, right? Like say that's brought in, at least like makes you wonder to a degree, like there's going to be some rotation, there's going to be some changes at roles. With that not happening, with there not being like a big free agency signing, like it makes it pretty clear, like, all right, we're probably just going to really like Tyler Warren, Downs, and Pierce, with Pierce and Warren especially, like these dudes are going to eat. Warren is someone who I very much so considered putting here, but it's kind of hard to go up at the tight end position, just kind of given the nature of it. But nonetheless, Pierce, like even if the efficiency drops a little bit, you just add 40 targets to where he was already at. Even drop the yards per route run a little bit. Sure, why not? We'll do it. But like a little bit for 40 targets, like there's a lot of room for him to improve there, and to probably not be a true wide receiver 1, but to be a high-end wide receiver 2 whose weekly floor is a lot better than it was this past season, where it was like, all right, like maybe his point total doesn't change that much. Maybe it goes up like a point a week total, like point per game. But the floor, like it was erratic last season. Like, let's be honest. I think he'll be a weekly play this season.
That's interesting. So, I mean, he had 1,000 yards on basically 84 targets. To your point, he gets 40 targets. It'll be the first time in his career he goes over 100 targets, which, getting rid of Michael Pittman definitely paves a pathway for that to happen. So here's what's funny to me. And this episode's not out yet, but literally last night I was recording with Dr. Brian Scott on his podcast. And he wanted to go over some of the injuries, the post-draft and whatnot. Daniel Jones, of course, essential to Alec Pierce coming up this season, came up in conversation about his Achilles injury and where he think he's going to be. And, for an Achilles injury, Brian Scott is optimistic about him playing earlier rather than not, maybe even as soon as week 1. Now, what we don't know is how effective is he going to be, because the problem Daniel Jones has is that even when he was on the field dealing with what was a calf injury at the time, because he lost his mobility, he's just not a good enough passer from the pocket to consistently stand in there and deliver the football. He has to be moving around and making plays. That's usually when he's his best version of his throwing self. So when you take that out of the equation, if he's not going to be mobile at all, I have real concerns, because it's not like they have a pivot option, not a legitimate one anyway. I don't consider Riley Leonard a legitimate pivot option for this. Right now, Alec Pierce is consensus rank as wide receiver 32. He definitely has more upside in that because he's got the big play capability, even though he doesn't have the data profile you would look for in his past leading up to this point. But we know there's circumstances around that. So I'm with you. There's a lot of reasons that you should be able to get excited about Alec Pierce because he can, while yes, I'm with you, Adam, he gets his efficiency might take a dip, but his extra volume and big playability usually shows up as a guy who winds up being a mid-level wide receiver too in that archetype. It's just the Daniel Jones for me is what's holding me back right now. I mean, Chase, I don't know if you want to chime in here on that.
Well, I'm not going to jump in and defend my guy Danny Dimes right now because I think you're absolutely right that my entire fantasy respect for Daniel Jones, fantasy respect, not necessarily real life NFL respect. My entire fantasy respect for Daniel Jones is based on his mobility, but you take that mobility away, there isn't anything special there about him as a passer or anything else. And there's not a whole lot else left on that roster, in their quarterback room that is special outside of the mobility of Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. But Alec Pierce, I mean, yeah, this is a kid. He's obviously, in my opinion, he's obviously the top wide receiver target left on that team. I like Josh Downs, but Josh Downs is also 3.5 feet tall. And I mean, he gets open well and he runs routes right. But that's not necessarily what Daniel Jones and or Riley Leonard and or Anthony Richardson are ever going to be good at trying to throw to a guy who's running routes like that. I think they want to be able to just use that guy downfield and use Alec Pierce. But Alec Pierce, there is the potential there based on what he can do and based on the idea that I don't think that he tops out at 84 targets this year. I think there's no way he gets fewer than 100 targets. There is room for him to move up and not just be a low end wide receiver 2, but a high end wide receiver 2. And if everything shook out right, to flirt with that 12-13 line, wide receiver 12-13 line, just based on the extra volume that I anticipate him seeing in that offense. Because like you said there, Adam, they did not do anything to add to that wide receiver room after they lost Michael Pittman. I don't have a ton of faith in Nick Westbrook-Akina. I'm sure he's a good dude. His mother loves him. And I do have a couple of deep league dynasty shares of him, but they didn't do anything else for that wide receiver room. And so it's Alec Pierce and Josh Downs or bust. And with the extra volume that Alec Pierce is going to get, heck yeah, I'm going to be much more apt to look his way in drafts than I ever have before, because again, I have always viewed him as a more volatile piece because of how he's been used and who's been quarterbacking in that room. Your point is a good point, though, Dan, about Daniel Jones and Riley Leonard and who is going to be throwing in the ball and how effective is that person going to be. But I think that based on what he's been able to do to this point in his career with less than stellar quarterback play, adding that extra volume on gives me good vibes for Alec Pierce this year.
Yeah, I think that, like, to say it succinctly, just wide receiver, like low end wide receiver 2 is like a median outcome is perfectly like a reasonable take, but his ceiling outcome is very tantalizing. And I don't think that the pathway, like, it's within the cards, I guess. Like, it's very possible. Now, again, ceiling outcome, not saying it's the most likely event, but it's one of the events that could happen for him for sure.
If his consensus ranking is 32, and if his ADP ends up following along those same lines and he's going as a wide receiver 3, I would be thrilled all day long to get him as my wide receiver 3, because I think that there's wide receiver 2 floor. And I think that there's ceiling, like I said, to scrape and flirt with that wide receiver 1 territory there. I really do. He has to maintain the efficiency that we've seen him. But like I said, and you know it because you've seen it and you watch it, it's your team, dude. He's already done this without stellar quarterback play.
Yep.
And he's been getting better and better throughout his career. Make him the number 1 dude in that wide receiver room. And I think that he finally kind of reaches that potential that we all were hoping he would reach when they drafted him.
Mm-hmm.
I can't stand hotel internet. I can't. It just drives me up a wall. So I'm assuming you guys are still talking about Daniel Jones, because I don't know.
Yeah, no. Well, yeah, we just finished rehashing and talking about Alec Pierce and the idea that he's already done all of this with no quarterback consistency, and so add volume on. Take only what he's done in his career to this point, but then add volume onto it. If he's already been a low end wide receiver 2 and you add volume onto that, that's more points by default. Why, if he's going to go as a mid-level wide receiver 3, I'll take that price all day long. Which is different than what I anticipate necessarily seeing with DeVonta Smith after a possible AJ Brown trade, because I see Smith rising up draft boards at that point, and even though I'm in on him, I don't know that I'll want to be in on him at the price I may have to pay for him. But Alec Pierce, if they want to give him to me for wide receiver 3 prices, I may end up with quite a few shares of him.
Makes sense, especially in best ball. He's definitely going to be a value if you're sitting there as a 3rd level wide receiver. All right, so let's get into my guy, and you guys can react to this. This is somebody's going to be drafted pretty high still, but I had to add him on, and it's Rashee Rice. And part of the reason is because he's already been a riser through the offseason. We got clarity on the fact that his suspension is no longer up in the air for 2026. He's going to be fine as far as off the field issues that he was facing heading into this year yet again. But again, not going to be suspended. The Chiefs didn't draft a wide receiver until the 5th round, and it was Cyrus Allen, who I'm not expecting to make any kind of an impact whatsoever, at least not in 2026 at all. Patrick Mahomes, there's been nothing but good news on Patrick Mahomes, like to the point where like we have to start talking about Mahomes possibly being back for week 1. Now, how mobile he is, who knows? But if he's back out there in the field for week 1, that's a boost to all pass catchers, regardless, especially over a Justin Fields. He's already gone from round 6 to round 3 in ADP. Yes, early ADP, I grant you. But still, that's all the things he was dealing with, all the variables that we were worried about clearing themselves up. There's still room for improvement because even in round 3, we're talking about a guy who's like borderline wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. Well, last season in the 8 games that he did play, he was the wide receiver 5 on a points per game basis with over 15 points. The guy was getting damn near 10 targets a game, over 6 receptions a game, over 70 yards a game, over more than half a touchdown a game. Like everything that you would want in a wide receiver 1 was Rashee Rice. And bringing back Travis Kelce doesn't worry me in any kind of capacity. Just expect his play to decline. Mahomes having less mobility potentially coming off of this injury would lead him to getting the ball out of his hands faster, not holding on to it, which would mean more for Rashee Rice, not more for Xavier Worthy, maybe more for the running game. That's a potential possibility, but this is still going to be a pass-first offense when it's Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. So there's nothing in my mind why Rashee Rice's value couldn't arguably be made in the back end of first rounds heading into like redraft for 2026. He's still being drafted in round 3. So while he has risen already, I think there's actually further value to be had here with a guy like this. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Am I too bold on Rashee Rice? Is he not a riser in your books? Is he already priced in? What do you guys got?
No, I'm all about Rashee Rice this season, especially now that we got the clarification, the current legal clarification, because that's part of the question with Rashee Rice is always what dumbass thing is he going to do next to get himself in trouble? That is a legitimate question, a legitimate reason for pause for people who are not Rashee Rice dudes. But he is the only, in my opinion, the only special thing in this wide receiver room for the Kansas City Chiefs. Yes, I know Xavier Worthy is faster than the wind, but I think Xavier Worthy proved his Xavier worthness last year, in terms of like what we saw out of him. I think he came back to the mean a little bit last season and showed more of what we are going to get out of Xavier Worthy as a fantasy asset, as an NFL asset. But there's not a whole hell of a lot else in that wide receiver room there. I mean, Tyquan Thornton, I love you, cousin Tyquan, but we know what you are at this point, and it's nothing special. Cyrus Allen, you just said 5th round pick, special teamer Nico Remigio. I mean, there's nothing else there for wide receiver.
Yeah, Jalen Royals still in the roster who didn't really make an impact last year.
Yeah. Notice I didn't mention Jalen Royals because he royally means nothing. There's just not a whole lot there. Like you said, Travis Kelce continues to, get older, and we've seen the decline, underway here. And with all that positive news on Patrick Mahomes, heck yeah. Who's he going to look for first in his wide receiver, in his pass routes? Rashee Rice is the number 1 target in that offense. And we've seen him do it. I've said from the beginning of his career, when he gets the ball in his hands, he looks different than everybody else on that team. He is special. He's a special player. He's a different kind of special mentally and what he does off the field, but he's a special enough player. I am loving Rashee Rice this season, and I don't know why anybody would be out on him because there's honestly nothing to compete with him for.
Yeah, so I meant to pull it up. So right now, Rashee Rice is wide receiver 8 overall. So, and again, I'm pointing out riser because I still think there's more value to be had. I think we are talking ultimately about a top 5 wide receiver. Here's who's directly in front of him: Drake London, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Ahmad-Ra St. Brown. So obviously we're getting the heavy hitters, right? And this is him moving up. This is consensus ranking. This is an ADP. ADP wise, he's actually more down towards wide receiver 13, which would have him behind AJ Brown and George Pickens and Nico Collins. Consensus rankings has him a little bit higher. So ADP wise, you already see it kind of in the rankings that they're already kind of priced in, and we're expecting him to move up anyway in ADP at some point. But yeah, ADP wise, definitely a steal. I think it's more interesting from the consensus ranking conversation, Adam. So we look at Rashee Rice, Drake London, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb. Is he over any of those guys in your book?
It's tough from like the top 5, 6. It's just tough to game spots there. Like, to your point, if he passed Justin Jefferson, would I be that surprised? Like, I don't know how bought in I am to Kyler. I love Kyler, but it seems like he's one of those cases where like the height he could only hide the height when he was an elite athlete. Even if he becomes a great athlete instead of an elite athlete, I don't know that you hide your flaws as well as you were once able to. So like I have some questions there. I like range of outcomes wise, if you told me that Rashee Rice finished as wide receiver 3, like I wouldn't be shocked. I think 6 is probably pretty fair, but I think his range of outcomes is all, he's got room to go up, I guess.
Well, I'm going to be dropping hints. I'm going to be dropping hints to my league mates and on the show and from here until I draft about Rashee Rice being a head case and legally you never know, he might. Yeah, hopefully they took his license away. I'm going to be dropping that all day long because if he maintains that wide receiver 13,
ADP, at ADP, different conversation.
I was like, I'm not even going to have it just because ADP wise, I think it should be a no brainer. And after the conversation laid out for you guys, even the public should think it's a no brainer there. But I would definitely, I don't. So I'm with you. Kind of Justin Jefferson is where I go back and forth. I definitely have him ahead of Drake London because there's a lot more red flags that Drake London potentially faces going into 2026 than I think Rashee Rice does. So that's kind of where I'm falling in on that. But let's wound it back up to Chase. Let's get to your next riser, my friend.
Yeah, here's a riser a guy that I haven't necessarily been a giant fan of in fantasy, mostly because of his, situations and where he's been and the fact that he's been a division opponent here now the last several seasons. But I'm going to go with DJ Moore, who I think is Josh Allen's clear-cut new wide receiver 1 there in Buffalo. We've been waiting for Josh Allen to be able to have a wide receiver 1, especially since Stephon Diggs, skipped town. And I like what he can bring to the table for that team, especially when we compare it to the other guys that are in that receiver room. I mean, Khalil Shakir, we all think that Khalil Shakir was supposed to be something here lately. And he's seen 95 targets and he's done some things occasionally. But I'm not worried about DJ Moore outperforming and out targeting Khalil Shakir. Honestly, I'm not. Joshua Palmer. I like Joshua Palmer as a football player. I like him much better as a real life football player than I do any kind of fantasy asset. And I don't think that he's any kind of threat to DJ Moore. Keon Coleman, I'm ready to be done talking about. They've got the new toy now in Skylar Bell that's come in and everybody is really wanting to latch onto him. And I think they're wanting to latch onto him because they're wanting Josh Allen to have a legitimate weapon to be able to throw to. Well, DJ Moore has shown in his career that he can be. And the thing that I like about DJ Moore is that he's coming off his worst fantasy season, top to bottom. He didn't do a whole heck of a lot for anybody last year. Disappointing, I think, to a lot of people. Played all 17 games, but saw the fewest targets of his career since his rookie season. And honestly, he had one more game played. So, I mean, on a per game basis, he saw the fewest targets of his career. He didn't score a whole heck of a lot. Now, if you want to look for a silver lining, I don't know what I'd call it a silver lining, that he had a career high 15 rushing attempts. I'm just saying, I'm hoping that people are down on him after he had such a step back last year, fantasy wise. I still think that his skill set going to Buffalo is going to give Josh Allen a very reliable target there on the outside. They're still going to use Khalil Shakir, how they've used Khalil Shakir, but now he'll have someone a little bit more consistent, a little bit more reliable, a much better veteran presence, and a much more capable presence on the outside. And if that's the case, I like DJ Moore to vastly outperform what he did last season. And so hoping and foreseeing the idea that people might be down on DJ Moore after last season, more excited about the idea of, Skylar Bell's coming in and that kind of thing. I'm thinking that I should be able to get DJ Moore for a decent price, a decent enough price, and that he outperforms that price this season. So DJ Moore is somebody that is rising in my book coming into this season.
I think he's in an interesting spot. So right now, consensus rankings would have him about wide receiver 28. Yep. And I think you have to, and this is what creates risers, right? You can't have everybody thinking the same thing. Otherwise, there would be no value. So what's interesting about DJ Moore is that I do think you have two sides of the coin when it comes to this argument. On one side, yes, he clearly has rapport with Joe Brady because he ran that offense before, and he should step in to the Bills as the number one target for Josh Allen. On the flip side, you can argue, well, since Joe Brady's taken over, he has done everything he can to distribute targets evenly across all of the receivers. And two, there's going to be people who look at DJ Moore after last year having his worst year in his NFL career, and it wasn't because of injuries. NFL, he played 17 games and will be turning 29, that maybe DJ Moore is just falling off a cliff and maybe he's going out of his prime. So you're going to have that argument on the other side. Again, you need those two lines of thought in order to have a player who could potentially rise past the value of which you're going to have to draft him at. I'm more with you. I didn't see a DJ Moore who was done. I was seeing a DJ Moore whose skill set based on the other players around him in the new offense didn't necessarily fit with what they were trying to do. That's what I saw last year's season. So I'm with you on the idea of like DJ Moore is wide receiver 28. Makes a heck of a lot more sense that he's going to finish inside the top 20, maybe even inside the top 16 than not. I mean, he's 2 years removed from having 140 targets back in 2024. He had a 55 target dip. Nobody was predicting that with Ben Johnson coming in. Not that much of a significant dip. I don't think it's due to declining play. I think it's just due to system.
Well, and we talked last year about the idea of Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, and Luther Burden. And I loved Luther Burden.
Loveland. Don't forget Cole Loveland.
And Loveland. We were like, okay, well, if you want to just transpose that Lions offense of Ben Johnson over to the Bears. Yeah, we all kind of were like, okay, well, DJ Moore, when they drafted Luther Burden, okay, does Luther Burden become the Amon-Ra St. Brown? And I think the answer was kind of somewhere in between, where Rome Odunze is the top receiver on that team and should be, in my opinion, but I still love what Luther Burden brings. But we kind of foresaw a dip in DJ Moore, at least. And I'm hoping that everybody else is like, because he's no good anymore. He's getting what? No, like you said, he didn't necessarily fit what they were doing. He was surrounded by other good weapons that did fit the system better. But now that he gets a chance to be a number one guy again, even if he's in that Joe Brady offense and trying to distribute targets, well, yeah, but are they distributing targets necessarily because they want to distribute targets, or because they didn't have anybody who warranted being a number one type option? That's the question. I don't think that Allen himself is necessarily looking to distribute targets evenly or anything. I think he would. If he has a number one target, he's going to throw to him, because we're only 3 years removed from Stephon Diggs having 160 targets.
Exactly. We've already seen that. If he's got a guy to go to, he's going to go to it. This is all Joe Brady and not really having that alpha dog in the first place in the building. That's where I'm at. Adam, why don't you talk about your next riser for us?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it's kind of like Rashee Rice. It's not a guy that's low on anyone's board, so to speak. So it's Chase Brown, who kind of, depending on where you're looking, he's somewhere in the lower third of RB1s, give or take. Maybe high end RB2 in a couple of spots, but kind of in that range, right? Call it 7 to 14, depending on where you look. I think that he's got a pretty strong shot to finish inside the top 6, at minimum top 8. Like I think somewhere in that range is very, very real for him. Like what I look at with Chase Brown, you see the post-buy usage for him where it kind of shifted. The biggest part of that is when he started getting used in the slot a little bit more, and the receiving game in general, but the slot especially. So for context, like the way that I can say that, like I can give you the number, that's no fun. The most illustrative way to get this across, Chase Brown has lined up in the slot for 76 snaps in his NFL career. Exactly half of those are from week 11 onward. He was lining up in the slot like crazy. He was genuinely being used as a real receiver for this offense, being used in the ways that we all gush over as fantasy analysts when it's like, oh, the running back's getting into the receiving game. He was lining up wide 10 times a game. Like, what are we talking about? So there's that aspect of it, right? Like the receiving usage post-buy, like they locked in and completely shifted it, and he was awesome. It meaningfully, like, we got real targets the rest of the way. It was like kind of up and down for the first part of the season. Then it's like, oh, he gets 7 a game now. That's just how this works. Again, that usage is a big part of this. The other thing is, candidly, losing Hendrickson sucks. All of that. I think they've done more to improve this defense than they've done to hurt it. Hendrickson, again, sucks. On the whole, off-season on the whole, this is a better defense. And within that, he actually has some opportunities to potentially run from ahead on occasion, which he very rarely has gotten the opportunity to do over his NFL career. He was not has not been on the best Bengals teams that they've had under the Burrow era. So I think that is a benefit to him. And then obviously, like the elephant in the room, you hope that you get Burrow for more than 8 games next season. So there's that. You never know. You can't predict injuries for any of these anyone, but any of these Bengals guys, especially. T. Higgins hamstring could go kaput tomorrow. Like Burrow is typically every other year, so hopefully this is the safe year, but you never know. So there's a bunch of variables in that sense, but like the other portion of it, and these are cliches to a degree, but they're cliches for a reason. This is a 26-year-old contract year running back, by the way. Both of those typically pretty sweet. That's typically age 26, typically your peak. Contract year, love it. It's like everything that could possibly go in his favor. The draft was like all defense and offensive line until you get into day 3. Like literally everything shook right for him. They didn't really change the RB room. Like it's going to be his same backup, so you don't really expect anything that crazy there. Like I think that he has a really good chance to hold his points per game that he had in the second half of the post-bye portion of last season, which would put him firmly in the conversation to be in the top half of RB1s.
I was wondering if you were going to mention the fact that he was 26 on a contract year, because I always relish in those opportunities, especially for running backs who are dual threats like a Chase Brown is. One of the biggest winners of the offseason, no doubt about it. Samaje Perine, I think they even figured out finally that he is dust, so we don't need to keep seeing this guy on the field an annoying amount of times for absolutely no reason. So everything shakes out right. And it was funny enough, I actually made this comment when I was doing the show last night. Connor Lew might be the #1 rookie pick of the entire draft because the Cincinnati Bengals actually drafted an interior offensive lineman to potentially give Joe Burrow a pocket. Boy, oh boy, if we get Joe Burrow with a pocket, with those weapons, we might get real excited about what that offense in general just might be turning into. Talk about red zone opportunities for Chase Brown heading into this season. And even though they made some improvements to the defense, I'm not expecting it to be so much that we're not seeing shootout games week in and week out for the most part with the Cincinnati Bengals either. So completely with you on that one. Consensus ranking right now has Chase Brown at about running back 8, but ADP has him pushed back to about running back 14. So again, you're kind of like, to your point, this is similar to my Rashee Rice, where yes, he is going high in drafts, but there's still more value to be had. There's still more reason to think that this guy can go even higher or be valued even higher. And maybe you're getting him at a little bit of a discount still. Like right now, even in consensus ranking, the guys, there's 3 guys in front of them I think we could have a conversation about. You have DeVonta who's at running back 7. You have Ashton Genty at running back 6. You have James Cook at running back 5. I think he very much fits 1 in that tier. But 2, I would make a real strong argument that he should be ahead of an Ashton Genty right there at 6, and that he should be ahead of a DeVonta who might be on one of the worst offensives of all time heading into 2026 next season. I think we can have those conversations. So I'm totally with you on this one. Chase, I don't know if you want to get a couple of comments in before I...
Your fellow Chase.
Listen, Chase Brown is always going to have a special spot in my heart because he was one of my starting running backs on my home team league that finally won the damn championship for me last season. So I'm always going to be thrilled with Chase Brown to begin with. But I think that our worry with him, my worry with him going into last season was, that, like you said, they had brought back Samaje Perine, who we had thought about and they had used as a passing down back. And then Chase Brown promptly went out and was 4th in the league in running back targets last season behind only the big 3 of Gibbs and McCaffrey and Bijan Robinson. As long as that kind of volume holds, I love it. And then, like you said, Dan, I anticipate that this defense is going to perform better. If the defense performs better, this team can play from ahead a little bit more. I think they're going to continue to use him on the outside as a pass catching option, like you said, Adam. But I think they'll be able to continue to use him as a running back and actually use him as that kind of clock killer, game killer a little bit more. Continue to see that kind of volume. And I think that the sky is the limit there for Chase Brown. So I really like that idea too. I think that, it sounds weird to talk about a guy who was a running back 1 as being a riser, but I think that there's more meat on the bone. And if people aren't going to catch up to that ADP wise and aren't going to catch up to that ranking wise, I'll be willing to take that shot all day long. If I have a high pick in the draft, in a snake draft, I'm picking 1, 2, 3 kind of thing. If I can get Chase Brown then on the return late in round 2 as my second running back, and then get a nice wide receiver to start the 3rd round, Katie bar the door. I think we're ready to go.
I'm with you guys. Okay, Chase, this is going to be for you. I can't believe I'm defending one of your guys, the biggest risers, but I am. And as I'm going through this the early part of the process, sure, we're still got a couple more months to go, but this is shaping up to be the player who I'm going to wind up dying on a hill for going into 2026. It just seems to be pointing in that direction.
Thank you.
Christian Watson. I know what everyone's saying already. Christian, oh my God, we've heard the Christian Watson story time and time again of being a riser, and he's always hurt, and he never comes through for us when we need him to. But the optics are there. The data is there. The opportunity is there. The Packers didn't even bother drafting a wide receiver. Matthew Golden did not look great in his rookie year. Maybe he's a lot better year 2. But I know he's not as good as Christian Watson is. They signed up Jaden Reed. They got rid of Romeo Doubs. They got rid of Datavian Wicks. They're still looking for a potential alpha. And I think they kind of learned last season that they need somebody who's going to be at least a go-to weapon in the confines of the scheme of the offense. And they can't just keep getting away with this whole, like, we rotate 5 wide receiver thing and try to give everybody their equal opportunity. They clearly understood that didn't work because, again, they moved on from Wicks and Romeo Doubs. So you're talking about Christian Watson, Matthew Golden, and Jaden Reed being the 3 receivers when they would go 11 personnel. And again, this is a team that does mostly 2 wide receiver sets and, like go 12 personnel and stuff like that. Watson's going to be one of the guys who's on the field at all times, even in that scenario. Last season, 10 games, wide receiver 17 on a points per game basis, 11.49 points per game. He came in off of yet another injury and still looked like he was as explosive as ever. I'm just done counting this guy out as far as him being able to come in and pop the top off at any given game, any given time. His per game receiving snapshot, 5.5 targets per game, 3.5 receptions per game, 61 yards per game, 0.6 receiving touchdowns per game. Whenever Watson's been on the field, he's always had a ridiculous touchdown rate. I don't expect that to change. All I need him to do is take that next step of 1, be healthy, 2, prove that you can be the guy Jordan Love goes to the most. Because if we're going from, let's say, 5.5 targets to 6.5, 7, we're talking about another realm that Christian Watson could potentially hit, especially with his type of touchdown rate throughout his entire career and his big play capability. I think this is actually an Alec Pierce souped up in a lot of ways, because he has a more stable quarterback situation, in my opinion, and we haven't seen the best of him yet. Like Alec Pierce, we might not have seen the best of him yet as far as an overall productive standpoint, but I think we've seen the best form, if that makes any sense, of Alec Pierce on the field. I don't think we've seen the best of Christian Watson yet. So again, this is going to be a place where I might wind up dying on this hill, but this is somebody who's rising up very, very quickly. Again, we're talking about somebody in that wide receiver 3 range that could really pop and really and be a high end wide receiver 2. Easily could see that wind up happening. So, I mean, Chase is the Packers fan, so I guess I'll have him react first.
Well, we've said it now. This will be the 5th season that we've said it now. Christian Watson is the only special thing in that Packer wide receiver room. Jaden Reed is a nice player. Again, a player that I'm much happier having on my real life team than necessarily my fantasy team. Matthew Golden, as he told me at the draft when I interviewed him, he said, "Oh, I got that dog in me." Well, great. Everybody's got that dog in him, dude. You didn't show a hell of a lot of dog last season, okay? He's a nice player. I think he's going to be okay. He's not special. Christian Watson is. Christian Watson has the speed, the size, the ability to be something special. With Christian Watson, it will come down to, as it has come down to for the last 3 years, it will come down to his health. Like you said, can he stay on the field? Because if he's on the field, you can't not throw the ball his way. He's the best thing in this receiver room. And Tucker Kraft is a special weapon at tight end and can be. But great. Then you'd have 2 actual special weapons in the pass game, and you wouldn't be able to scheme and game plan for, to take absolutely everything away just by eliminating one of them. Christian Watson, I love it. And right now, best ball wise, he's going as what, wide receiver 28, I think, is in best ball drafts right now. But this is a guy that has so much potential. Can he stay healthy? That's the only question. If you don't want to take that gamble, I get it. But again, the only special thing in that wide receiver room, I'll take a bet on that all day long. Not just because I'm a Packer fan.
All right, so let's jump into some guys we think might be falling off the board here a little bit. And I want to kick this over to Adam. Adam, lead us off with your number 1 faller.
I mean, this is the chalky one, and I imagine that's why you just want to go ahead and get it out of the way. But it's a conversation that we've had on some of these shows, but it's worth, lamenting, I suppose, here. Cardinals running backs that aren't Jeremiah Love are more or less dead. From a fantasy football perspective, they've become handcuffs and vultures. And to your point, that's why I didn't put one name. I put the non-Jeremiah Love Cardinals running backs, because we can look at this from plenty of different angles. The James Conner is like, all right, do we have one last hurrah on us? Nope. No, we do not. All right, next. Do we have the Algier finally gets out from under the elite running back and gets his own backfield the first time since his rookie season? No, we do not. Do we get Trey Benson, finally young running back, into the fold with these veterans? Maybe, old running back things happen and he gets a real opportunity. No, we do not. We get a top 5 draft pick running back to the Arizona Cardinals, which kind of puts all of these guys in handcuff and prey situations. And Jeremiah Love in particular, this isn't some of these other running backs we've had in previous years, where it's all right, well, maybe there's a receiving role or a red zone role, or there's a role left for someone. Nope. Love will be the guy in the red zone. Love will be the guy in receiving downs. I'm gonna be like, there's no real role open. So it's unfortunate. It's chalky. Like, it's one that you've probably already heard before if you're listening, but and nonetheless, it is very true, and it is worth, like you said, lamenting. Like, it sucks. I would have, especially Algier. I feel so bad for Tyler Algier. I was really hoping to see him kind of get his own backfield at least for a season or two, but here we are.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing for Algier is that he's the type of running back who ages well. So maybe he will find one more shot somewhere along the way. Who knows? And I do think he's the one who's going to be the handcuff of the group, just given what the contract was they paid him. Because James Conner took a pay cut. Trey Benson still on his rookie deal, and we haven't seen much.
I don't know if James Conner's still there.
Well, so that's
we almost certainly see one of these guys out.
Correct. And Chase, to your point, I was literally about to lead into that, where I think you would be doing the Cardinals and James Conner a favor if they were to just cut him sooner rather than later. And now I imagine they're probably still going to wait till training camp to do such a thing. And maybe in his case, that wouldn't be such a bad thing because injuries happen in training camp. There might be an opportunity. You weren't expecting that. It kind of opens up for him to get one more shot. The whole reason the guy took a pay cut to come back to the Arizona Cardinals because he wanted one more shot to still be a significantly involved running back. It will do him a big favor, and the Cardinals, frankly, a big favor if he were the one to be getting wound up being cut. Trey Benson, fine. Third string running back, still a younger guy. I would absolutely keep that, but hopefully that's what we'll see. Chase, who's your faller?
My number one faller that I wanted to talk about here is Theo Johnson, tight end for the Giants. And now some people might be like, okay, well, they didn't necessarily have him all that high to begin with. No, we didn't. But we had talked about when he came in that we were excited about the idea, or at least we had some interest in the idea that a guy who's 6'6", 6'7", his height could be a weapon for them in the red zone and could do some things. And then he went out and he scored a third of his points, his fantasy points for them last season was in the red zone. And then, okay, well, then Daniel Bellinger's out of the way. He went to Tennessee and okay, great. But then they brought in Isaiah Likely. And now I'm worried after they drafted Fields as well. I'm worried that anything that Theo Johnson could have given you on the field as a receiver, whether it's between the 20s or from the 20 into the goal line, all of the things he can give you are now redundant with people who are going to be on the field a whole hell of a lot more than he is. I don't think that there's any way that he sees the field enough and gets enough targets and gets enough of the value type targets that he's any kind of usable fantasy asset. Whereas we actually saw him at times last year be that usable fantasy asset. Isaiah Likely coming in pretty much eliminates anything that Theo Johnson was going to be able to give you, I think, between the 20s in terms of from that tight end situation. And then going from the 20 in, if you're looking for that big, tall red zone type target, well, you've got Malachi Fields, who's a big, tall, nice wide receiver. Probably needs to be a little bit more physical in terms of, fighting for those kinds of contested catches. But again, like I said, I worry that everything that Theo Johnson could have theoretically given you as a tight end is now taken away, or at least greatly diminished by the additions of Isaiah Likely and Malachi Fields to this football team. And so for that reason, even, as a lower end, roll of the dice crapshoot type, draft pick at tight end, I don't see a whole heck of a lot there for Theo Johnson. And it bums me out because I had a bunch of him in Dynasty betting on that 6'7", 6'6", 6'7" red zone threat type capability. And now I really worry about that. And I worry about it too, from the standpoint of this team, bringing in Matt Nagy as a play caller. The things that Matt Nagy likes to do with the tight end, I think that Isaiah Likely is going to be able to fill more of those kinds of things in the open field than Theo Johnson is. So I'm completely out right now on Theo Johnson as any kind of fantasy asset.
Yeah, so I'm going to push back on one little thing, and I'm not disagreeing with any of your points. The optic wise, pathway wise, opportunity wise, it doesn't look as promising as the ones did for Theo Johnson, who had a decent season last year and looked like that was a season that could have been built upon.
Right.
Because Isaiah Likely coming in definitely represents an issue. The one thing I'm going to push back on, though, and this is more of a shot across the bow to the fantasy industry. Why is Isaiah Likely ranked as a tight end 13?
No,
The
I'll
guy's
agree with you on that. Run with it.
he's never even topped 500 yards receiving. He's never gone over 6 touchdowns passing. Like the brand name of Isaiah Likely is stupidly high compared to what the actual production on the field has been. Now, you can sit there like, well, he was paired up with Mark Andrews. Okay. I don't think his usage is going to be all that different with next to Theo Johnson next season. You're still talking about a guy who's going to have to be in 12 personnel, who's still the move tight end, who still has Malik Neighbors and Cam Scatterbo coming out of the backfield, and they drafted Malachi Fields. Like, there's still going to be other mouths to feed. The idea that Isaiah Likely is such this dynamic tight end, that he sucks the air out of the tight end room, is ridiculous to me. So, not that you were making that point, but I bring that up to say this. I don't think Theo Johnson's dead. Now, he's not somebody you're going to necessarily spend any draft capital on in 2026, but we're talking about dynasty shares here. I would still very much hold the Theo Johnson, because the one thing Jackson Dart did do last year, he was making Theo Johnson relevant. He was making Daniel Bellinger relevant. Like, he likes to throw the ball over the middle of the field to the big guys, the tight ends over the middle of the field. I don't think that necessarily changes even with Matt Nagy. Matt Nagy's not come from a system where he takes away that. In fact, when he was the head coach of Mr. Trubisky, who I don't think is that much different than Jackson Dart. I know I'll get a lot of crap on Twitter about that one, but I don't think he's all that different. I don't think the offense that Matt Nagy plans on running is drastically different than what he did in Chicago. Most of it was RPO, throw over the middle, get the tight end, get the big boys involved. I think Theo Johnson's not dead. Like I said, I'm not going to spend a bunch of capital. I'm not saying his value is great for 2026, but I don't think Isaiah Likely just moves him out of the way.
First off, everybody out there, Jackson Dart is Mitch Trubisky. Find him at Dan Mader at DMaderFF on Twitter. Remember, that's a new Twitter handle, so find him there and discuss. We'll have a good time with that. But no, I agree with you completely. My point is not necessarily so much that I think that Isaiah Likely is. I'm not on the train that Isaiah Likely is elevated by moving north from Baltimore to New York. But like I said, I just think that it takes away some of the things that I think we were hoping we would see from Theo Johnson after last season. I was hoping that last season would be a stepping stone for Theo Johnson, would be kind of a breaking out point. And unfortunately now with Likely coming in and with Nagy coming in and with the things that Nagy likes to do, he doesn't run 12 personnel all that much more than the rest of the league. He's pretty average in terms of his usage of 12 personnel, which is fine. And yeah, they might want to throw the ball to the big guy over the middle, but is Theo Johnson going to be the big guy over the middle, or is he going to be blocking? Is he going to be shorter? I worry way too much about where the targets are going to go in this offense and the kinds of things that I think they can get out of Fields, that they can get out of Likely, pushing Theo Johnson completely out of fantasy relevancy, especially for this season. I won't be dumping him in Dynasty by any means, but he's definitely falling in my eyes this season.
No, I hear you on that. Okay, so here's my number one faller, and that is RJ Harvey. And this is something that's been talked about since the draft. As soon as Jonah Coleman was drafted, J.K. Dobbins is back. Everybody is kind of on the idea that RJ Harvey should be a faller. Right now, he's still kind of hovering around in that high-end RB3, low-end RB2 territory. And I can make the argument, look, J.K. Dobbins never stays healthy. I can make the argument that he's a year older and that RJ Harvey, raw statistically wise, wasn't that bad for a rookie season who wasn't the lead back, especially as a touchdown producer and had the receiving role. And I don't think Jonah Coleman coming in for 2026 necessarily takes that off the table. But RJ Harvey, the reason why he was fantasy relevant is because he had a stupid touchdown rate. And that's something that's completely and utterly volatile. And I wouldn't necessarily count on again, even if Dobbins, who has never played a full season, misses time again, and RJ Harvey probably still would be the lead back over Jonah Coleman. But here's my big fear, is that Sean Payton does the most Sean Payton-y thing of all, like we saw with him, the Saints, and decides, hey, Coleman, you're going to get 6 to 8 touches, and Harvey's going to get 9 to 10 touches, and then J.K. Dobbins is going to get what's left, and then all of a sudden this becomes a backfield that nobody wants to touch. That's a real possibility here given Sean Payton. That's what's so annoying. And remember, Harvey was already older when he was drafted. He's already 25 years old going into this season. So he didn't have a lot of time to make his mark, let's say, to be a lead type of back to begin with. And what this move shows me is that he will never get that opportunity that we were hoping that maybe he would when they drafted him in the second round, surprisingly, because no one had RJ Harvey going in the second round in the NFL draft. So we thought maybe the Broncos had a bigger plan for him. And I'm starting to think that maybe that's just not going to be the case. So RJ Harvey, his long-term value, his 2026 value, I think just keeps him in the flex conversation and nothing more. Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, no, it is unfortunate. I liked RJ Harvey quite a bit coming out, but his rushing ability has not translated, at least to this point, outside of the red zone at the NFL level. And this running back room is a slog. There's just a lot of mouths to feed. And we've seen Sean Payton in the past spread that ball around between a lot of backs. So it's hard to be overly optimistic about Harvey. Maybe from a dynasty perspective, like the world where you can get a couple flex seasons out of him is still there. But the idea that this is a guy who is going to be like an emphasis for you in redraft, I think is probably about shot. Like it's hard to really live in that world, which sucks. Again, I really liked RJ Harvey, but just hasn't been there.
Yeah. So who's your second faller?
Yeah, for me, that is the aforementioned Michael Pittman. The passing offense for the Steelers, it is hard for me to confidently say that we have room for more mouths to feed. We're still, I think we all probably expect Rodgers to return, but we're still living in this reality where we're not sure. Contract hasn't been signed. So there's a non-zero chance that this quarterback room looks pretty horrible week one. They're otherwise, the best case scenario is that a quarterback in their early 40s shows up to training camp for the first time all summer. That's best case. For a guy who projects as the wide receiver 2 possession type guy, almost certainly will be playing largely on the outside, largely are going to be a run forward team. There's just not the range of outcomes is pretty narrow, to be honest. I don't think that there's this world, I guess absent DK getting hurt maybe, where there's some massive upside to be found here. I think that we're probably just looking at a ho-hum possession receiver, kind of either way you really look at it. And if the volume will be there, sure, he'll probably get hyper targeted, but he'll probably get I'd be kind of shocked if he was into the mid-teens in yards per reception. I wouldn't be shocked if he was between 9 and 12. And I wouldn't be shocked if he had 3 to 4 touchdowns. So cool. PPR, you might have a flex type floor. I think that's within reality. I don't think you're getting many pop weeks out of him. And they're just not at the range of the draft where he's going to operate. I'd much rather be searching for upside. So he's someone who I at least won't be very excited about at all in very many drafts, which sucks. I like Michael Pittman, but it's just the role plus the type of passing offense he's going to be on. Plus, they did add Jeremy Bernard, who I don't think you should be terrified of, but one, it's another mouth to feed, and two, it shows a clear intent that they don't feel like they're finished in this wide receiver room, and they're looking for other roles. So there's just a lot going on here, and not a whole lot of it is positive other than, okay, cool, you get a possession receiver and a dink and dunk offense, but if you're not getting the end zone, who cares?
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's just never been Pittman's bread and butter at any point in his career. So he's sitting consensus ranking down at wide receiver 44 at the moment. And I don't have a ton of reason. Look, right now, what's sitting ahead of him is Ricky Pearsall, Jordan Addison, Parker Washington, Jacoby Myers, Mekhi Lemon. And I can make some cases for him to be ahead of some of those players. but I can't make overly strong cases for him to be ahead. But the one thing I would say this, so DK Metcalf, for instance, is at wide receiver 34. While I don't think that's drastically insane by any stretch of the means, I do think Pittman and Metcalf should be a bit closer, because I do think there's a real possibility that Pittman is the better fantasy wide receiver than DK Metcalf. Look, at this point with Metcalf, man, it's so hit or miss. It's been so long since we've actually seen the season that made Metcalf a name to begin with in fantasy football circles. And I think ever since 2022, if you've drafted DK Metcalf, you've been sorely disappointed at the ADP of which you drafted him at. And I don't know that this year's necessarily going to be any different, even if you bring back Aaron Rodgers. So last year, you can kind of throw last year out the window to some degree from the standpoint of, okay, it was Arthur Smith. So Aaron Rodgers throwing for 498 times and having that being the lowest he's had since like basically his rookie season and pass attempts for a year can kind of put to the side, because it's clear to me you brought up Bernard being drafted by the Steelers. McCarthy coming in, they look like they're going to want to run 11 personnel. That's been his background. I think that's why you make the Bernard pick when you did, after you already traded for to bring in Pittman and already had DK Metcalf. You're setting this up to be an 11 personnel team. I'm with you. I think if Aaron Rodgers was going to retire, I think he would have done that by now. It's definitely a clear indication to me he is coming back. So can we bump this up from 498 to 550? Like, I think that's probably a pretty reasonable number to get to. If we get to that number, to your point, PPR-wise, Michael Pittman might have enough volume because he's going to operate closer to the line of scrimmage. Aaron Rodgers doesn't hold on to the ball because he doesn't want to get hit. So it's going to make him a more natural option. The 4 touchdown thing is the issue. But here's what I would say to that. If Pittman's going to get over 100 targets next season, and he does become the alpha as far as volume in that offense, he's going to finish higher than wide receiver 43.
Yeah, 43 I can get behind. The problem is he was a wide receiver 2 last season, and that's where he's got, to be candid, no shot in hell.
Sure. But I do think we're talking about a guy who could be a mid-level wide receiver 3, and right now, he could be a value. So that would be, I guess, my one pushback to you is that right now I think the value is actually already baking in some of your concerns.
Yeah, for sure. And that's where it's just like, faller, yes, but has he maybe fallen a little far? That's kind of a fair conversation to be had, but he definitely fell. The question's how much.
And fell for good reason, because the Rodgers thing keeps holding everybody up. All right, Chase, so what's your second faller?
I think it's kind of funny that we keep bringing up all these running backs, because honestly, one of my thoughts was to just spin the wheel on Washington / Arizona / Denver / I mean, there's so many backfields right now. It's like, oh man, I don't want any part of that because of the cluster, that they all can be. And I'm kind of going that same direction here with my second faller. It's Jaylen Warren, a running back for Pittsburgh. Jaylen Warren, he's the guy that we all were like, oh, he needs to take over. The fantasy spear was all, oh, he needs to take over. He needs to be the guy. He needs to be the guy. And then Najee Harris just kind of kept Najee Harrising, and they kept using Jaylen Warren as they use him. And then last year, we thought it was going to be his year to, finally be the guy. And yeah, okay, he took over as the lead running back guy. But for a guy that, again, and I said this last year, for a guy who had a reputation, or that we all kind of saw as a guy who was a pass down back, at least, juxtaposed against Najee Harris, he'd never had really operated as one. And lo and behold, yeah, I talked about, the idea that Chase Brown had been 4th in running back targets. Guess who was 5th? Kenneth Gainwell, Jaylen Warren's backfield mate. And some of that is because, yeah, they had Aaron Rodgers, who no longer pushes the ball down the field and is a dump off artist now. Throwing it short all the time to Kenneth Gainwell, but Kenneth Gainwell's gone. And so then you kind of could get excited. Maybe Jaylen Warren will be a giant volume workhorse guy again. And then they go and bring in Rico Dowdle. And now I'm not a big Rico Dowdle fan, but here's the thing is Rico Dowdle and Jaylen Warren, again, there's a lot of redundancy there in what you can get from the two of them. I think Dowdle's a better inside runner. So I don't think that Warren is going to have to be as much of an early down guy as he was last year, because Rico Dowdle can be an early down guy. if they were going to allow Warren to be a passing down back, they would have allowed him to be a more passing down back than they were. They wouldn't have just handed the reins at that position to Kenneth Gainwell. Now, yes, Jaylen Warren did still have, 45 targets last season, which for Jaylen Warren is pretty good. I mean, he had 48 the year before. He had 74 the year before that. He caught 40 out of 45 balls. He's an efficient receiver, but he's not a ton more efficient per touch and per opportunity than Rico Dowdle has been in his career. So where Jaylen Warren, we had kind of all hoped going into last season that he was finally going to become a guy and the guy. Well, we get rid of Najee Harris. They bring in Kenneth Gainwell. That kind of screwed the Jaylen Warren, train. And then this season, okay, well, Kenneth Gainwell's out of the picture, but now they bring in Rico Dowdle. I don't have any hopes for Caleb Johnson, but Caleb Johnson is still there. I just think that the Rico Dowdle thing really kind of screws over any, hope that Jaylen Warren was going to be more than what we've seen out of him. And so Jaylen Warren for me is a guy that I'm stepping back on this season. I'm definitely not as high on him coming into this year as I was last year.
It's just funny because Jaylen Warren's had the drum beat for him for what feels like for frickin' ever. And last year was actually his best season. He still fell short of 1,000 yards, though. That was kind of the big issue there. But he had 6 rushing touchdowns. That's the most we've seen him have. He was right in there. He was second in his receiving yards as far as his career highs go. But he just didn't overtake like people thought he might. And the problem with that is Jaylen Warren is a committee type of running back. And so far, over the last couple of years, Rico Dowdle has pretty much blown up, whether it was with Dallas, he's given the opportunity, and blew up with Carolina. He edged out Chuba Hubbard. So there's a scenario here where Rico Dowdle could edge out Jaylen Warren again. Right now, Jaylen Warren's ranked at running back 28, and Rico Dowdle's ranked at running back 30.
And let's not forget, too, that he's going to be playing for Mike McCarthy this year, who was the guy who somehow turned Aaron Jones into a meh fantasy asset when Aaron Jones should have been the lead fantasy asset in that backfield.
He rotated Aaron Jones. That's what held him back for so many years. So we had to say, free Aaron Jones, give him the opportunities. I don't see why he doesn't keep this a 2-man committee and basically make both of these guys RB3. So I'm kind of with you here on Jaylen Warren. Okay, so my guy, and this will be the last guy for the show, is Dalton Kincaid. Baller. Man, we were this close to a Dalton Kincaid being a riser, maybe even a breakout candidate. Instead, they re-signed Dawson Knox. They still have Jackson Hawes. And while blocking tight ends typically don't get in the way for fantasy relevant type of tight ends who are receiving, they definitely do in Buffalo because Dawson Knox comes in and plays more than Dalton Kincaid and keeps. So here's what you're looking for out of a receiving tight end to get into the top 12 and consistently at that. I'm not talking about touchdown, boom, or bust type of guys. You want them to have at least somewhere between 70 and 75% of the routes. Dalton Kincaid consistently stays in that 65, 68 area when Dawson Knox is on the field because he simply doesn't get enough snaps. And because Dawson Knox is a good red zone threat, Dalton Kincaid doesn't necessarily just take over in that role either. There's nothing to indicate that that's going to change in any type of capacity at all. So this is more from a dynasty take of this because we thought we would have a chance now of multiple years Kincaid to start to take off. We can make it a 2026 thing too because right now Dalton Kincaid is ranked as the tight end 10 at the moment. And look, I know last year on a points per game basis, he was the tight end 10. But my thing is that at best case scenario, you are drafting him at value. And for a tight end who simply doesn't have a ceiling to be more than what he is, at least not in a normal pathway, I'm not going to bother wasting my time. I'm either taking one of the top guys or getting some upside. By the way, Travis Kelce, George Kittle are both 1 and 2 spots behind Dalton Kincaid in the rankings right now. Yes, of course, there's reasons for that, but I'd rather take George Kittle, who might be back week 1, and the upside of what that could represent than the Dalton Kincaid at 10. So the Kincaid thing, and I'm more doing this as a shout out to where I think the Kincaid can be a top 8 tight end in fantasy football is dead. Maybe not forever because tight ends can last a long, long time. I get it. But with the Knox extension, highly unlikely that it happens now at this point. Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. And I want to throw in one extra layer that you hadn't brought up is that it's there's the idea like, okay, maybe he comes in as like a big slot kind of guy, right? Like if his role can kind of move into that direction, then sure, maybe there's a world. Within that, they have a pretty good slot in Khalil Shakir, who's probably not going to lose the slot role. 2, they, in my opinion, pretty clearly drafted Khalil Shakir's heir apparent. So you're blocked at tight end and you're blocked at slot. So you will strictly be moved tight end in a team that wants to be big and wants to be physical. There's not really any pivot room one way or the other. You can't pivot into the every down tight end. You can't pivot into the big slot. You are stuck where you are, and there's just not any room for movement. So I'm with you. It's just kind of role locked is like the best way to put it. There's just nowhere for him to go to find any upside.
Like the only thing that could possibly change would be we see something that we have not seen to this point, and that's Joe Brady just decides, even though we extended Dawson Knox, Kincaid, you're just going to play more at the tight end position because we just want another weapon out there. Like we haven't seen that come to fruition. It's been multiple years now, and with them signing Dawson Knox again, I tend to think that it's not going to happen. But that's like the only pathway that this changes from what it has been. I don't know. So that's where I'm at with those guys. But it's a great show that we had for the fantasy football risers and fallers. Hope you guys all enjoyed it. Make sure you download Operation Domination on your favorite podcast app and check out our video content when you go to the Fantasy Football Advice Network at FF Advice Net. We'll be back next week, similar style episode where we're talking about our bold breakout and bold bust predictions. So I'm sure we'll get some debates and some hot topics on that one and talk about social media feedback. That always gets everybody rolling. So we'll see you guys next week. Tune in then.